The living room smelled of vanilla and chocolate. The scent of the cake that sat proudly on the dining table, covered in white frosting and lined with strawberries. Balloons floated near the ceiling, the golden letters spelling, "Happy Birthday, Mom," shimmered under the warm light, and latter bounced from corner to corner as friends and neighbors mingled. It should have been one of the happiest evenings of my life. A night where I was surrounded by those I loved, celebrating another year of existence. But little did I know that the one person who was supposed to stand by my side and honor me most would be the one to cut me deeper than anyone else ever had. My son Daniel had always been a little distant with me, though I told myself it was just the phase of a teenager growing into his 20s. He was 21 now, tall and confident, with the kind of charming smile that made people laugh with ease. Everyone adored him, his cousins, his friends, even my closest companions. And I adored him more than anyone in the world. I had raised him alone after his father left us, worked 2 jobs, skipped meals just so he could eat better, and sacrificed everything so he could go to college without worrying about money. I thought my love and sacrifices meant something. When the moment came to cut the cake, the room grew quiet. I held the knife, trembling with a mixture of joy and nerves, while people sang and clapped. Daniel stood beside me, one hand casually resting in his pocket, looking like the proud son he should have been. But his eyes, there was something mocking in them, something sharp I couldn't quite place. I closed my eyes, made a wish, and blew out the candles. Everyone clapped, cheering, and I felt my heart swell. Then Daniel's voice rose above the noise, loud enough for everyone to hear. "You know, it's funny," he said with a smirk. "We're all here celebrating my mom, but honestly, what has she ever really done?" The room fell silent, the cheer sucked out like someone had broken a balloon. My hand froze over the cake, the knife trembling. I turned to him, my smile faltering. "What do you mean, Daniel?" I asked softly, my voice already cracking. He chuckled, shrugging. "Come on, Mom. I mean, you've never really achieved anything, have you? You never had a big career, never built a business, never became someone people admire. You just stayed home, worked boring jobs, cooked, cleaned. Honestly, you're kind of useless." The words hit me like a storm of knives. Useless. The guests shifted uncomfortably, some lowering their eyes, others gasping. My sister pressed her lips together, clearly mortified. My best friend Clara shook her head in disbelief. But Daniel just stood there, grinning as though he had said something clever. I felt my chest tighten. My throat burned as I tried to swallow the tears threatening to spill. "Daniel," I whispered, barely able to breathe, "how could you say that?" "Because it's true," he said bluntly. "I mean, look around. Everyone here has stories of their careers, their successes, their travels. What do you have? Struggles? Sacrifices? Nobody cares about that. You've been nothing. And maybe it's time people stop pretending otherwise." A gasp echoed again. Someone muttered, "That's cruel." But Daniel just shrugged like it was no big deal. I wanted to run, to scream, to disappear, but I stood frozen, gripping the edge of the table so tightly my knuckles turned white. The balloons above me seemed to mock me, the golden letters on the wall twisting into a cruel joke. The party carried on awkwardly after that, though the joy was gone. Conversations became hushed, laughter forced, and I could feel eyes darting toward me, full of pity. I forced a smile, forced myself to cut the cake, forced myself to hand out slices, pretending nothing had happened. But inside, my heart was shattering into 1,000 pieces. When the last guest left and the house grew quiet, I sat alone in the living room, staring at the wilted balloons and half-eaten cake. My son was upstairs, laughing on the phone with his friends as if he hadn't just humiliated me in front of everyone I knew. I replayed his words in my head over and over. Useless. Nothing. The kind of words that cut deeper than any blade. I thought about the nights I stayed awake sewing his school uniforms, the years I worked late into the night to pay for his books, the times I skipped meals just so he could eat. All of it dismissed in a single cruel sentence. And as the tears finally fell, a strange kind of fire sparked inside me. A fire I had never felt before. My son thought I was useless, nothing more than a shadow, but he was wrong, so very wrong. That same night, Daniel would regret what he said. He would learn that the woman he called useless was far more powerful than he ever imagined. And his lesson would begin sooner than he thought. The fire that burned in my chest that night wouldn't let me sleep. I lay awake in my bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to Daniel's muffled laughter through the thin walls. Every laugh felt like another stab, Another reminder of the humiliation he had poured over me like ice water in front of everyone I loved. I wanted to scream at him, to march into his room and demand an apology. But I knew my son. He would shrug, roll his eyes, maybe even laugh in my face. No, a simple confrontation wouldn't work. He had chosen to expose me in front of others, so his lesson had to be one he would never forget. Memories flashed through my mind him as a boy, clinging to my skirt when he was scared of the dark, his little hands holding mine when he took his first steps, the way he used to say, "Mom, you're my hero." Somewhere along the way, that little boy had vanished, replaced by a young man who saw me as nothing more than a stepping stone, and I realized something painful. I had given him everything, but in doing so, I had allowed him to believe I was weak. That night, I decided to show him just how strong I truly was. The next morning, Daniel stumbled downstairs late, his hair messy, his eyes half closed from staying up all night. He dropped into a chair at the breakfast table without so much as a "Good morning." "You're up early," he muttered, yawning. I sipped my coffee slowly, watching him. I couldn't sleep. "Why not?" he asked, already scrolling through his phone. I tilted my head, studying him. "I was thinking about what you said last night." He froze for a second, then smirked without looking up. "Oh, that? You're not still upset, are you?" I was just being honest. Honest. My voice stayed calm, but inside I was trembling with a strange mixture of pain and determination. "You humiliated me in front of everyone. Do you know what that felt like?" Daniel finally looked up, his eyes sharp. "Mom, come on. Everyone's too sensitive these days. I wasn't trying to hurt you. I was just pointing out the truth. It's not like you've really accomplished much. I mean, you raised me, sure, but that's it." I leaned closer, lowering my voice. "Raising you was the hardest and most important thing I've ever done. And if you can't see that, then maybe it's time you learn exactly what I went through for you." He raised an eyebrow. "What's that supposed to mean?" I didn't answer. Instead, I smiled faintly and stood up, gathering my coffee cup. "You'll see." For the rest of the day, I went about my routine quietly, but in my mind I was weaving something far bigger. I remembered all the times I had shielded Daniel from the harshness of life, sparing him from struggles I endured. But if he thought my life was so insignificant, maybe it was time for him to face the reality he had been blind to. That evening, I told him we needed to talk. He rolled his eyes, but I insisted. "Not here?" I said. "Come with me." He frowned, but curiosity got the better of him. I led him out to the old storage shed behind the house, a place he rarely went. Inside, stacked neatly in boxes, were pieces of my past, photographs, letters, documents, reminders of the life I had lived before and after his father walked away. Daniel shoved his hands in his pockets, unimpressed. "What's this?" Some trip down memory lane. I pulled out a faded envelope and handed it to him. "Read it?" He sighed, opened it lazily, and then his expression changed as his eyes scanned the page. It was a letter from his father, the man who had abandoned us, mocking me for being too weak to survive without him, laughing at the idea that I could raise a child alone. "That's the kind of things people used to say about me," I whispered. "That I was weak, that I couldn't do it, that I was useless." Daniel glanced up, uncomfortable. "Mom," I didn't let him finish. I opened another box, pulling out receipts, hospital bills, eviction notices, all the evidence of the years I spent clawing my way out of despair just to keep him safe. "Do you see these? Every night I worked double shifts. I came home exhausted, sometimes with only enough money to buy you dinner while I went hungry. You were too young to notice. But I survived it. I made sure you never saw the pain I went through, because I wanted you to feel secure. And now you call me useless." His face paled as he shuffled through the papers, his fingers trembling slightly. "You think strength is about careers and money and titles," I said, my voice growing firm. "But strength is about sacrifice. It's about fighting through hell and still standing. And you insulted all of that in front of people who know exactly how much I've endured." He swallowed hard, setting the papers down. For the first time, he couldn't look me in the eyes. I didn't know it was like this." "That's because I protected you from it." I snapped, my voice finally cracking with anger. "But maybe that was my mistake. Maybe I should have let you see how hard life can be, instead of letting you think everything was easy." Silence filled the shed, heavy and suffocating. Daniel shifted uncomfortably, guilt flickering across his face. But guilt alone wasn't enough. He had wounded me too deeply. I stepped closer, lowering my voice into something sharp and cold. You called me useless. But mark my words, Daniel, before long you're going to learn just how wrong you were. And when you do, it'll be a lesson you'll never forget. That night, Daniel barely touched his dinner. He pushed his food around the plate, his usual arrogance replaced with an uneasiness he couldn't hide. I ate in silence, watching him, feeling the weight of everything unsaid pressing down on the room like a heavy curtain. After clearing the dishes, I stood by the sink, rinsing plates slowly, while Daniel lingered by the table. For once, he wasn't glued to his phone. Instead, he kept glancing at me, his lips parting as if he wanted to speak, then snapping shut again. Finally, he muttered, "Mom, I didn't mean it like that." I dried my hands and turned to him. "Didn't mean it. You looked me in the eyes in front of everyone and said I was useless. That doesn't just slip out by accident, Daniel." His shoulders slumped. I don't know. I wanted to make people laugh. I didn't think it would hit you that hard." I laughed bitterly. So humiliating me was supposed to be a joke. That's even worse. Daniel opened his mouth, but I raised a hand, stopping him. "Save it. You've said enough." I walked upstairs, leaving him standing alone. My heart pounded with both pain and a grim sense of resolve. He thought one weak apology would erase everything, but no, words had consequences. And by the time this night was over, he would understand that fully. Around midnight, I heard footsteps outside my door. Daniel hesitated before knocking softly. "Mom." His voice was quieter than usual, stripped of its usual confidence. "Can I come in?" I sat up in bed, staring at the door, but didn't answer right away. After a pause, I said flatly, "It's open." He stepped inside, rubbing the back of his neck like a child who knew he was in trouble. He looked nothing like the smug young man who had mocked me hours earlier. He looked small. "I couldn't sleep," he admitted. "I keep thinking about what you showed me in the shed, the letters, the bills. Everything you went through. I didn't know, Mom. I swear I didn't." I stayed silent, letting the weight of his words hang in the air. He sat on the edge of my bed, his voice breaking slightly. "When I called you useless, I wasn't thinking. I was being stupid, trying to act funny. But now I feel sick. I can't get it out of my head. The look on your face when I said it, I'll never forget that look." For the first time, his eyes filled with tears. Real tears. He covered his face with his hands, his shoulders shaking. A part of me wanted to reach out, to hold him the way I did when he was little. But another part, the part that still felt raw and bleeding, kept me rooted where I was. "You hurt me more than anyone ever has, Daniel," I said quietly. "You broke something in me tonight, and no apology can fix it right away." He nodded miserably. I know I don't deserve forgiveness. But I don't know how to make it right. Please, tell me what I can do." I studied him, the boy who had once been my whole world, now trembling in guilt before me. And in that moment, I realized the revenge I had envisioned wasn't about destroying him. It was about opening his eyes, making him truly feel the weight of what he had done. "You want to make it right?" I asked. "Yes," he whispered. "Anything." "Then you're going to walk in my shoes," I said firmly, his brows knitted. "What do you mean?" "You've had an easy life, Daniel, because I carried the burden for you. But tomorrow that changes. You're going to experience the kind of days I lived for years. The exhaustion, the sacrifice, the endless struggle. And maybe then, you'll understand what you dismissed so carelessly." He looked at me like I'd spoken another language. "You're serious." "Deadly serious," I replied. "You wanted to laugh at me, to call me useless. Now it's time you see what useless really looks like." His lips parted, but he didn't argue. For once, he just nodded, shame clouding his face. That night, he slept restlessly, tossing and turning. I could hear him through the walls, shifting in bed, sighing heavily. And though part of me pitied him, another part felt a grim satisfaction. This was only the beginning. The next morning, before the sun rose, I woke him up. He groaned, pulling the blanket over his head. "Up," I commanded. "You wanted to know how I lived. It starts at 5 in the morning. He sat up, bleary-eyed. 5. For what? For work. You'll see." By 6, I had him dressed in old clothes and dragged him to the diner, where I used to work the morning shift. The manager, an old friend, agreed to let him help for the day. And so, my son, who once laughed at me, now found himself scrubbing dishes, carrying trays, cleaning tables while the smell of grease and coffee clung to his clothes. I watched from a corner as customers barked at him, as sweat rolled down his face, as his hands turned red from hot water. By the time the shift ended at noon, He was limping, his back aching, his face pale. He stumbled toward me, gasping. "How did you do this every day?" I smiled faintly, my eyes narrowing. "This was just the start, Daniel. You've got a long way to go before you understand." Daniel collapsed onto the couch the moment we got home, groaning as though he'd just run a marathon. His hair clung to his forehead with sweat, his hands were raw from soap and water, and the smell of grease still clung to his clothes. I almost laughed, not out of cruelty, but out of disbelief. This was the boy who thought I had done nothing with my life, yet one half day in my shoes had nearly broken him. He lay there with his arm over his eyes. "I can't believe you did that every morning. For years. Alone." I folded my arms, leaning against the doorway. "That was just one of 2 jobs I worked, Daniel. After the diner, I used to rush to the grocery store for the afternoon shift. And some nights, I cleaned offices downtown just to make ends meet. You think exhaustion is new? That was my reality every single day, while you slept peacefully in your bed." His arm dropped, and his guilty eyes met mine. "Why didn't you ever tell me it was that bad?" I sighed. "Because I didn't want you to grow up carrying my burdens. I wanted you to feel safe, to believe in a future without fear. I thought I was doing the right thing by shielding you. But maybe I only made you blind to what it cost me." He sat up slowly, his expression twisted with shame. "Mom, I feel sick. I can't stop thinking about the way I spoke to you that night. The things I said, it was like I stabbed you in the heart." "You did," I whispered. "And wounds like that don't heal easily." For a moment, silence stretched between us, broken only by the ticking clock on the wall. Then Daniel clenched his fists, his voice trembling. "Please let me keep proving myself. I need to feel what you went through. I need to understand." And so I let him. Over the next week, I led him through fragments of my past life. He worked beside me in the grocery store, hauling heavy boxes, dealing with impatient customers, his legs buckling from hours on his feet. I sent him to the same cramped apartment I once cleaned, where he scrubbed floors until his knees ached. I even showed him the old bus routes I used to take when we couldn't afford a car, making him wait in the cold for rides that never came on time. Each night he returned home more broken, his voice hoarse, his hands calloused, his body aching. But his eyes, those arrogant, dismissive eyes, were changing. The more he endured, the more he saw. One evening, after another long shift at the diner, he sat at the kitchen table, his head in his hands. "I don't understand how you did this, day after day. And all while raising me, I barely lasted a week." I poured him a glass of water, setting it gently in front of him. "Because I had no choice. You were my reason to keep going, Daniel. Every meal I put on the table, every rent payment I scraped together, it was all for you." His throat worked as he swallowed, tears brimming in his eyes. "And I repaid you by calling you useless." My lips trembled. "Yes, you did." He slammed his fists lightly on the table, his voice breaking. "I'm so sorry, Mom. I don't deserve your forgiveness. I don't deserve anything." I reached out, my fingers brushing against his scarred knuckles. "You're my son. You'll always deserve my love. But forgiveness that has to be earned. And you're starting to." His tears finally spilled over. He covered his face, sobbing quietly. For the first time in years, he looked like the boy I used to know, the boy who once clung to me, who once called me his hero. My heart softened, but I kept my resolve. This lesson wasn't complete yet. The turning point came one night when we were walking home from another shift. The air was cold, the streets dimly lit, and Daniel trudged beside me, his shoulders hunched. Suddenly, a group of his friends passed by in a shiny car, laughing and shouting. They spotted him, rolled down the window, and one of them jeered. "Hey, Daniel! What happened to you, man? You working with your mom now? Thought you were better than that." His friends laughed, the sound echoing cruelly through the night. I braced myself, expecting Daniel to lash out in embarrassment, to push me away. But to my shock, he squared his shoulders, turned to them, and shouted back, "You don't get it? My mom is the strongest person I know. I'm not better than her. I'll never be better than her. She's the reason I'm even standing here today." The car sped off, their laughter fading. But my heart nearly burst. For the first time, Daniel didn't hide me in shame. He defended me. When we got home, he turned to me, his eyes blazing with conviction. "I regret every single word I said at your birthday. You're not useless. You're not nothing. You're everything. And I'll spend the rest of my life proving that to you." I felt my chest tighten, my throat burning. Tears finally fell, but they weren't just from pain. They were from something I thought I had lost forever: hope. Still, I knew the final part of his lesson wasn't over. Words of regret were powerful, but actions would show me if he truly meant them. And soon enough, Daniel would have the chance to prove it in a way neither of us expected. The next morning, the house phone rang just as I was making coffee. It was Clara, my oldest friend, her voice tight with panic. "My car broke down, and I have no way to get to work today. They'll fire me if I don't show up. Can you help me?" Normally, I would have dropped everything and rushed to her aid, because that's who I'd always been: the dependable one, the fixer, the friend who sacrificed her own comfort for others. But before I could answer, Daniel spoke up from the kitchen doorway. "I'll do it," he said firmly. Clara hesitated. "Daniel, sweetheart, are you sure? It's a long way. I don't care. You've been there for my mom for years. I owe you. Give me the address. I'll find a way." I stared at him, stunned. This was the same boy who once rolled his eyes at the idea of doing anything inconvenient. Now, without hesitation, he was volunteering to go out of his way for someone else, because she mattered to me. After he hung up, I asked carefully, "Are you sure about this? You don't even have a car." He smirked faintly, a shadow of his old arrogance. But this time it was softer, almost self-deprecating. "Gus, I'll take the bus, just like you used to. Consider it part of the lesson." And he did. He left before sunrise, returned hours later drenched in sweat and smelling of bus fumes, but grinning as he told me how he managed to get Clara to work just in time. That was the first test, and he passed it. But life, as it often does, wasn't finished with us. The second test came in the form of a bill. One I'd been dreading. The roof had been leaking for weeks, and though I tried to patch it myself, the repair company finally sent an estimate. When Daniel saw the number, his eyes widened. "3,000!" he exclaimed. "How are we supposed to pay that?" I sighed. "I've been putting money aside, but it's not nearly enough. I'll figure it out." But Daniel shook his head fiercely. "No. You've already figured out everything else for me. This time, it's my turn." The very next day, he started looking for extra work. He picked up shifts unloading trucks at a warehouse, even signed up to deliver food on his bike. I watched from the window as he pedaled through the rain, his clothes soaked, but determination written across his face. Every dollar he earned, he tucked into an envelope labeled "Roof." He refused to let me touch it, and slowly, day by day, the envelope grew thicker. At night, I'd hear him groaning from sore muscles, icing his knees, struggling to keep his eyes open. Yet he never complained, never once suggested giving up. Instead, he'd look at me and say, "I get it now, Mom. Every sacrifice you made, it wasn't weakness, it was strength. And if I have to bleed for this roof, I'll do it, because that's what you would have done." His words carved themselves into my heart. For years, I thought my sacrifices had gone unseen, wasted. But now, my son was reflecting them back to me, learning them, living them. The final test came unexpectedly one stormy night. Rain hammered the roof, thunder roared, and suddenly, Sira Sike, the old tree in our yard toppled, smashing against the side of the house. I screamed as the windows rattled and Daniel bolted upright. Without hesitation, he grabbed his coat and ran outside. "Daniel, wait!" I cried, but he didn't stop. The rain poured down in sheets, soaking him instantly. But he fought with all his strength, dragging branches away from the house, pushing debris aside to keep the water from flooding inside. His hands bled, his body shook, but he kept going. I rushed out with him, trying to help, but he spun toward me, his face fierce. "No, get back inside, Mom. You've done enough. This is my turn to protect you." For a moment I froze. My son, the same boy who once called me useless, was now shielding me with every ounce of his strength. By the time the storm subsided, the yard was a mess, but the house was safe. Daniel collapsed onto the porch, soaked and shivering, his chest heaving with exhaustion. I knelt beside him, pressing my trembling hand against his cheek. The storm left behind more than broken branches and soaked soil. It left a silence in our home, the kind of silence that follows a war. Heavy, reflective, and filled with unspoken truths. Daniel spent the next few days repairing what he could in the yard, patching the small cracks in the siding, sweeping debris, and hauling away ruined wood. I offered to help, but he wouldn't let me. "Mom," he said firmly, gripping the hammer with blistered hands, "this is mine to fix. You've fixed everything your whole life. It's time I do the same." And I let him. Not because I couldn't help, but because I saw something in him I had long prayed for: responsibility. He wasn't the boy who mocked me anymore. He was stepping into something greater. someone I barely recognized, yet had always hoped he would become. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in streaks of orange and purple, Daniel sat with me on the porch. His face was tired, his body still sore, but his eyes glowed with a strange peace. "I've been thinking a lot," he began quietly, "about who I was, about that night." He swallowed hard. "When I stood there at your birthday and called you useless, I didn't just embarrass you. I betrayed you. I spat on everything you've ever done for me, and I can't forgive myself for that." My heart clenched. "Daniel." "No, let me finish," he said, his voice firm. "That night, I thought strength was about success. About careers, money, status. I looked at you and thought you had none of that. I thought it made you weak. But I see now you had something far greater. You had endurance. You had courage. You had love that never gave up. That's real strength. And I was too blind to see it." His words pierced me, not like daggers this time, but like a balm on an open wound. Tears gathered in my eyes as he reached for my hand, his grip steady and warm. "I regret everything I said," he whispered. "And I promise you, for as long as I live, I will never make you feel small again. Because you're the reason I stand tall." I broke then, sobbing into his chest as he held me tightly, the roles reversed. My son now protecting me, as I had once protected him. But life wasn't done with its lessons. A week later, Clara called again. This time, her news was heartbreaking. Her landlord was evicting her, and she had nowhere to go. Without hesitation, I told her she could stay with us. When I hung up, I worried how Daniel would react. After all, he had already endured so much change, and having another person in the house would be a burden. But when I told him, he didn't flinch. Instead, he nodded firmly. "She's family, Mom, and if you say yes, then so do I. We'll make it work." And we did. Daniel gave up his room, moving to the couch without complaint, while Clara settled in. I watched him haul her bags, fix the leaky faucet in her room, even cook dinner one night when I was too tired. Every action proved that the change in him wasn't fleeting. It was real, lasting, and rooted in something deeper than guilt. He had grown. The final moment that sealed it came a month later. I received a call from the local community center, where I used to volunteer when Daniel was small. They were organizing a fundraiser to help struggling single mothers, and they asked if I would come share my story. My instinct was to say no. I hated speaking in public, hated reopening wounds. But before I could decline, Daniel snatched the phone from my hand. "She'll be there," he said firmly. "And so will I." The night of the fundraiser, I stood nervously at the podium, the crowd of faces blurring before me. My hands shook, my voice wavered as I began to tell the truth. The nights of hunger, the double shifts, the humiliation, the sacrifices. But then, halfway through, Daniel stood up in the audience. "Can I say something?" he called. The host hesitated, then nodded. Daniel walked to the stage, his tall frame towering beside me. He took the microphone, his voice steady but thick with emotion. "My mom stood here tonight and told you about her struggles. But what she didn't say, what she'll never say, is how much of a hero she truly is. She kept food on the table when we had nothing. She gave me every chance in life, even when it meant giving up her own dreams. And when I was too blind, too arrogant to see that, I hurt her in the worst way possible. But I stand here now, in front of all of you, to say that my mother is not useless. She is the strongest, most incredible person I know. And I will spend the rest of my life proving myself worthy to be her son." The room erupted in applause, some people even standing. I stood frozen, tears streaming down my face, as my son wrapped his arm around me. In that moment, the pain of my birthday humiliation finally dissolved, washed away by something far stronger: redemption. That night, as we walked home together under the stars, Daniel looked at me and whispered, "You taught me what strength really is, Mom. And because of you, I'll never underestimate sacrifice again." I squeezed his hand, my heart overflowing. The boy who once mocked me had become a man who honored me. And though the scars of his words would always remain, they no longer burned. They reminded me of how far we had come, and how deep a lesson he had learned. Revenge hadn't come in the form of cruelty or punishment. It had come in the form of transformation. My son had seen the truth, felt it, lived it, and now he would carry it with him forever. And that, I realized, was the sweetest revenge of all. He looked up at me, his eyes glassy but burning with sincerity. "Do you believe me now? That I regret what I said? That I know how wrong I was?" Tears blurred my vision as I whispered, "Yes, Daniel, I believe you." And in that moment, something inside me finally healed. The wound he had carved into me on my birthday still existed, but now it was stitched together with his sweat, his tears, his actions. He had proven himself. Not with empty words, but with the kind of sacrifice I had lived my entire life. Yet even then, I knew the lesson wasn't just about me. It was about him. About the man he was becoming. And soon he would face one last choice. One final moment that would decide whether this change in him was real or just temporary.